Welcome to Wellywood Wargaming, where the grim dark never sleeps. Crack open a bottle of wild snake and spark up a low stick as we take a journey down Underhive.
Let me make this perfectly clear, sisters. A Goliath is not a threat in the traditional sense. A toxin is a threat. A malfunctioning plasma gun is a threat. A Goliath is just a slightly larger meal. You'll hear a lot of Underhivers talk about them with awe, as if sheer mass is a virtue, as if being able to deadlift a cargo hauler while screaming strong is the pinnacle of martial skill. Well, these people are not to be listened to. They are victims of what we in Escher society call Mandrew syndrome. Aye. Mandrew Spate. The name alone is enough to curdle Grok's milk. The so-called Tyrant Prime of the House of Chains. Self-styled alpha of alphas, hololithic influencer and walk-in cautionary tale about what happens when testosterone is allowed to ferment without the stabilising influence of a second thought. Spate is not just a Goliath. He is the Goliath. A symbol and a cautionary tale carved in muscle and misogyny. He claims to have fought his way out of the sump with nothing but his fists and a starch protein bar. That he once bench-pressed a cargo hauler at age 3. That he beat an Ogrin in single combat using only his bare left arm. All of this, of course, broadcast daily on his holovid channel, House of Hardness. He speaks to young, underdeveloped slab brains across the Underhive with such pearls of wisdom as, if you didn't own a fighting pit by age 4, you're basically a servitor. Technology is for weaklings. The bigger the biceps, the harder the fall. His followers, known as Spatiacs, are mostly half-trained forge babies with impulse control issues and access to a protein tube. You'll recognise them easily. They're the ones flexing at their own reflection in puddles, or trying to explain that logic is weakness while failing to open a starch tin. They wear slogans etched into their armour, things like, might is right, don't think, lift, and emotion is for enforcers. They gather in crumbling muscle clubs, chant about discipline, and ignore the fact that half of them are chemically castrated by their own stim regimens. And yet, the hive uplifts him. Hollow banners of his quotes line the walls of Goliath territories. Slab fighters chant his name before entering the cage. Enforcers nod approvingly because Mandrew keeps the masses busy breaking each other instead of questioning power. He preaches about masculinity, strength and order to a clan house that wears nipple clamps and bondage belts with complete ignorance. You ever notice that? The more they scream about being manly, the more they look like they lost a fight with an Underhive lingerie store. Half of them are covered in spikes and studs in places that no medical professional would endorse. Well, they call it armour. We call it evidence. And then there's the hair. Mohawks. Towering, unwashed, poorly dyed crests of silliness rising out of skulls too thick to host a second thought. They spend more time styling their hair than a spire bride on Oath Day, and yet still manage to look like a grok sat on a paint mixer. Vivid colours, presumably, so their fellow meat brains can spot them through the testosterone fog and avoid redundant headbutting. Now let's talk about the real horror. Their gene smithing. These imbeciles. They tinker with their own DNA. without supervision, without proper rights or any idea what they're doing, without, Crones preserve us, peer review. They believe that if you add enough muscle mass, the brain will just figure it out later. They modify themselves with crude, vat-grown hormone implants and stim-charged glands, turning already unstable man-children into twitching piles of muscle and rage called stimmers. Stimmers are what happen when you ask the question, what if this idiot was angrier and harder to control? And then said, yes, with a syringe. They don't walk, they vibrate. They don't think, they smash. Their average lifespan is 15 minutes, if unsupervised, and 5 if they see themselves in a reflection. I once saw a stimmer challenge a lift platform to a duel. He lost. There is some crocs too. Like some kind of toddler's idea of a pet. Horrible, armoured reptiles bred in filth, barely contained by chain leashes and bad intentions. Goliaths treat them like brothers, which makes sense considering both are cold-blooded, aggressive and incapable of climbing stairs. I've watched one eat a corpse, a toolbox, and its own leash in the same 10-minute window. And the crack wasn't even hungry. It was just bored. But of course the Goliaths respect that. Destruction for no reason? Well, that's the closest thing they have to a philosophy. We, on the other hand, are descended from one of Necromunda's first true houses. Our knowledge predates House Helmore. We carry wisdom in our blood. Goliaths? They are vat-grown accidents with shoulder spikes, and yet somehow the hive sings their praises, calls them noble savages or warrior kings. No one mentions the fact that half of them think a tactical manoeuvre is running in a straight line and shouting. And let me be honest, because honesty, unlike musculature, is not artificial. Sometimes, just sometimes, I wonder what it's like. What it's really like to believe the world is as simple as bench presses and violence. To shout something utterly dumb and have everyone clap. To live without complexity, without doubt, without the weight of knowing better. That's not strength, sisters. That's a kind of freedom. The freedom of not being aware of how pathetic you are. And I envy that, in a way. Not their bodies, not their power, but the sheer bliss of ignorance wrapped in steel and leather chaps. Of course, then one of them farts near a vent and sets off a Promethean explosion and the spell is broken. So if you ever find yourself alone in the dark, hearing the low, guttural chants of meat club poetry echoing through the Underhive, do not panic. Just aim for the weak point, right beneath the ego, just left of the steroid gland. Oh, and remember, behind every Goliath brute is a vat technician desperately trying to make sure he doesn't glue himself to his own boots again.